Well, here we are on season 2 of the Deadly Uncle podcast, a safe space
for Deadly Uncle Conversations.
There we go. And today we have actually a wonderful guest, Mr. Walter White Bear. And I just am very excited. Walter McDonald, Walter White Bear, Walter with many different last names. This man, I got to know him through the music scene. And, it's great to see so many artists coming together, just like Walter here. He plays flute. He's a songwriter. He also plays the guitar. He's played in many, many different places around Canada, representing our people in a good way. So it's awesome to see a good brother here. And I know that Trent here, this is your guys' first time meeting.
Yes, we just met outside, and I look forward to learning more about you.
Yeah, well, I'm just glad to be here, boys, and see where this goes.
You never know on the Deadly Uncle podcast where things will go, that's for sure. You got 3 uncles here telling stories and, sharing who they are. So tell us where you're originally from.
Well, just like most natives, I don't really have a family tree. It's more of a bush. Right? They got raised by a stepdad, and I didn't realize that I had my real father until I was 25. And who I never got a chance to meet. He passed away. Yeah, I'm actually a Ferris. His name is, what's his name now? All I know is I'm a Ferris. And so I was born in Moose Factory, and my mom is from Sapatewak in Manitoba, and we moved out this way in 77, and then I stuck around, and the tribe went back home in around late 80s, and then I moved to Calgary to pursue a degree at the university. Yeah.
Wow. And what was your experience like growing up in your community?
Well, I was on and off the reserve, right? In the summer times, my mom would drop me off there, and mostly raised in the city. And at that time, it was different, right? My mom, when she said she grew up, there was very little alcohol in the res, like just around funerals and stuff like that. And then as time went on, she noticed that it got a lot more, the people started abusing it more, and so that's when she decided to take us off the res, because she didn't want us exposed to all that that kind of lifestyle.
Walter, so you said you grew up in the city and you went back to the reserve. What city did you grow up in?
Mostly in Edmonton, and then like I said, I came this way in 1991, 92, started going to school.
Yeah, you came here to go to the U of C, and what did you take in university?
I took philosophy and English, so I learned all about Machiavelli and Dante and Benedict and all the Western thinkers, and I got through that, oddly enough, because my profs were really open to native spirituality, so I would they took oral teachings from the different medicine men that I've learned from along the way.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
Got pulled aside and said, "Where'd you learn this from?" And I told them, and they said, "This is cool because it was unique to them, because I don't know how often at that time back in the 90s, how many native students were going, right?"
Yeah, and how many native students were offering indigenous ways of knowing back to the professors, right?
Yeah, so I was quite fortunate that way.
That's cool.
That's amazing. And, what was your first experience when it comes to the arts? Were you ever into drawing or doing any of those things?
Not really. Like I thought, I had some artistic talent until I got into a room where they all studied it. All my stuff looked like the Potato Man, and compared to what these people could do. And then I thought, okay, maybe I'll try music. Because music's so awesome. It's an international language, and you can't eat it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. But when it's in the air, it's like the people gravitate towards that, right? I think, anyways.
Totally.
What was your first instrument that you played?
The guitar. I started late in life. I got my first guitar for my 16th birthday, and then kind of sat there for about, a little while, and then I picked it up. And this was before YouTube and lessons and all that. And Just go
Tell
to
me about it.
Yeah, go along McQuaid, and the guys would show me a couple chords, and I'll never forget the day that I actually played to a record. That's how old I am. One of the first ones was John Cougar.
Okay.
And Jack and Diane. I made those 3 chords work and playing with the record, and I can do this.
Yeah.
I'll never forget making those 3 chords work, and I got so excited my nose started to bleed.
I want to tell you a story about how I started playing guitar too, and it's safe to tell now because the Calgary Public Library apparently forgave library fines a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Well, when I first started playing guitar, I went to the Calgary Public Library and I took out a bunch of country chord books with songs, and they had the chord diagrams on there. So I learned how to play by these books and by playing along with cassette tapes or whatever, and I never gave those chord books back to the library. Could you imagine what my fines would have been?
That's good.
Yeah, I think that, like you say, music is definitely, a healing tool. I'm actually shooting a documentary right now about the Edmonton music scene and the open mic scene, all of that. And one of the themes that, the fans talk about, the people who don't pick up instruments, the people who play instruments, the bar staff, the jam hosts. I was talking to a guy who's running a jam for 16 years. And I said, why do you do this? What keeps you coming here? And he said, well, I'm a mortician by day. So I look forward to this as soon as it's done till the next week, And so has music been a healing tool for you?
Yeah, definitely. It was something I could identify with, and it made you cool back when I was in school and university, and it really connected people. And one of my most favorite memories was I planted trees while earning my degree. So every summer I would, take off to the mountains and just campfire and guitar. And that's when I realized that I had a knack for it, because people kind of knew the intro to, I don't know, Led Zeppelin song, but that's all they knew. And then I knew all these old Elvis and Buddy Holly and Dion and the Belmonts, like old school stuff, right? And back then I used to party before I took things seriously with the spirit path. And I thought, and I just have this uncanny ability to remember lyrics, and I just thought everyone can do that, but
apparently they can't.
They can't. And, it's just like, I don't know why. It gets embedded in there.
You talked about partying, and like when I first started playing, I've been playing in bars since I was 19. I played with my dad for 25 years, and partying was the big part of it when I started. And for a lot of years, I was drunk a lot while I was playing on stage. And music can be both healing, but it can also lead you down that wrong path too, right? Because you get used to it being part of the party.
Yeah, I know.
When did you have to decide to stop, the party scene for yourself? Like
okay, this is a safe spot. So like I came up from a real dysfunctional family, a lot of family violence. My mom and dad did their best and I forgave them. That's a different chapter. But when I picked up that guitar and I got to university and was dating like girls and getting into the whole scene, I overdid it with the booze. And I don't know why this happened, but it just, one reading week, I lived in residence in university, and a bunch of the boys didn't go home for Thanksgiving or reading week or whatever it was. And we went out every night, like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I'm talking like we'd come stumbling in at 2. And then on the last night, it was a Saturday, so Sunday morning at about 3, things were moving around my room. I'd hear shuffling of papers on my desk and, knocks on the door. And I was just paralyzed with fear, like some entity had come in the room and sat beside my bed and laid beside me, and it was heavy. And I was so scared that I couldn't move, and it sucked me in. And then it was saying stuff in Cree, like with this hot breath on my ear, and I thought my heart was gonna stop. I didn't know if I was dreaming or awake. At any rate, that thing finally left me alone at about, 2 hours. It seemed like forever. Woke up in the morning, and I told my mother what had happened, and she says, "You need to see a medicine man." Well, my mom grew up really Christian, right? So I was somewhat Christian because raised in that home environment, and I said, I have no idea. So I went to the Native Center at the U of C, and it just so happened that the following weekend they were having a sweat in Hobima with the Lightning people.
Okay.
Albert, Walter, and Rick.
Okay.
Lightning. That was my very first lodge. And I went there, and I was scared, and I didn't know what to expect. And, we just lost Albert like a couple years before that. I wish I would have met him. Anyway, it was Rick that was running it, and the lodge closed, and that rattle came to life, and it landed in my hand like someone had placed it there, and they asked me why I came, and I told them what I did, overdid it with the booze, and I told them about some of the childhood stuff that I went through.
Yeah.
And they just said, you're supposed to walk on this path, and whatever that entity was, look at it as a blessing, because it warned you from a different life. But I'll never forget what they also said, but it's up to you. You can either go right or left, but you're given a choice here.
Yeah.
And so then after that, I went all over the place, going to different vision quests. I think I've done about 18 to date. Went down with the Blackfoots even before I knew we were enemies. That's how naive I was.
And what is a vision quest for all our guests who might not?
So I learned from Peter and Jimmy O'Cheese when I was 26. That's where I got my name, White Bear, from that very first ceremony that I went to. And a vision quest is the way that they do it is they start with a sweat lodge, and then you're out on the land for 4 days and 4 nights, and but they put a blanket over you, and you take 4 willows with you, baby willows, like to build your own lodge. It's just big enough, like 8 feet, just big enough for one person. So we went out there, and you took your last drink at midnight, and you're there for 4 days and 4 nights. And the way that the initial one that I was taught, you had to stay in your circle, which was about 20 yards, and you couldn't move from there. So it was the very first one I did, and I thought I was going to die. The 3rd day, I didn't think I was going to make it. My throat was so dry, and I was so hungry. And then I got over that, and then it just popped into my head, so I'll share it with you. As I was in that ceremony on that 3rd day, when I thought I was going to make it about noon, I woke up and I couldn't see my hands. So I touched each side of my lodge to see if I was there, and my mini, shelter was like a pie shape, and I looked out, and for whatever reason, the Great Spirit showed me that spirit world and was moving like a giant rainbow. I can't describe the colors, and when there were the neighboring fasters, when they talked, it sounded like their voices were 360 degrees. And then I wanted to go and see it, so I moved forward, and then I slumped back into my body, like snapped back, and then I thought about the old man's words that you got to stay in this. And I said, the hell with that, I'm going to go find him. So I went and opened up my lodge, and he was sitting right there looking at me, eh? And I was looking at him, and he goes, I know what happened. He smoked his pipe. He didn't say nothing, and then finally he just said, that's for you. I don't know when it'll come into your life or what role it'll play, but that was a gift. Yeah. And so that was my first ceremony. What I remember the most about that was, other than that, I guess you would call it a vision when the Creator opens up the door like that, is when we were back in the lodge finally, and you do a sweat. So you begin with a sweat,
yeah,
and then you end 4 days, 4 nights without food and water, then you go back. And I was so thirsty and drained and really stripped down to bare wood, for lack of a better term. And it was that first drink of water, and I just remember I don't know why I remember this, but the first 4 guys, they just drank like horses. We're all like just dying of thirst, and I'm thinking, you selfish mother. Like we did it too, you know.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Save
you know,
some for me.
we did it too, and I was just so. But that really, to me, is a thing about like the self-centeredness of people, and I think that's one of the things that's keeping us back as Native people. Like, let's say you get a Juno. Well, your Juno Award's my Juno Award. You know, your degree's my degree. Your hit song's mine. If you do, and we don't have that mentality. We're too busy knocking each other down, and I think that's why that always stayed with me. So I try, and that's why I appreciate Kurt. If I can't do a gig, I always like forward him if he's available, right? And does the same thing. But I'll tell you, he's one of the few guys that does it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that, bro.
Thank you. You know, it's really important that, you know, like we said, you know, music, it has no color, it has no boundary. It's for all people under the sun and moon. And you know, it's you know, going back, you know, my father going to the residential school, as we were having that conversation, he played a guitar for his healing.
Yeah.
You know, and we're getting so used to those words. I went to the residential school. I was lucky enough to get his story, and I asked him, did you get a letter in the mail? Did you guys get any sort of warning? What happened, you know? And he said it was a roundup day where they just rounded up the children, and then the RCMP would come back later and tell the parents, listen, your children are safe. They're in the school now. And that's how they rounded him up. But he actually played that guitar right up until the day he died, you know? So it was like, you know, or the day he had his major heart attack, and he was never the same again after that. So it was 2 hours before that actually happened. So, you know, we lost both of our dads since we did our last podcast. And so it's been, you know, one of those things that we're learning.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's kind of well, music was a gift that my dad gave me, and his dad gave him. Like, my grandfather was a fiddle player. He played wind instruments. He was actually, this is a cool story. Kurt's grandfather was actually the music teacher at the residential school, and when he left, my grandfather, who went to school there, just took over because they were gonna stop the music program because they didn't have a teacher. So my grandfather was just a student, and he took over the music program for about 2 or 3 years till the school eventually found another music teacher. So both our grandfathers kind of influenced a whole generation of kids that went through that school and taught them how to play music, you know, like, so that's how we're connected through music as well, you know, like, and it is difficult. Like, for the first few months that my dad, when he passed, I couldn't get on stage anymore. Like, I had so many memories of doing it with him that it was hard to do it. But I'm finally kind of getting back into the swing of things, and you know, and it is tough. It's tough when you lose somebody that influenced you so much, right? Like, yeah.
So how did you boys get over your stage fright? That kind of pops into my head. Yeah.
Well, when I was younger, I drank a lot, like I said, right? So, like, I tell this story. Can't remember if I told it on last year's podcast, but the first time I got on stage, we're doing our dads had like an organization here in Calgary for Cowessess band members. So they were going to put on a dance, because there's probably almost 200 Cowessess band members that live in the city of Calgary.
Really running around loose. Eh?
Yeah, running around loose. Nobody keeps track of them anymore. So they're going to have this dance. So my dad provided the music, basically, but Kurt's brother Dean was learning how to drum at the time, and his other brother Dale was a guitar player, and those are my cousins, and so we all got together to play. My dad brought a band with him, but then he got us up there. Like, at 16, I got up and I played the bass and sang a song. My sister played a little bit of keyboards and whatever. So we go to this event, and it's all family and friends, and it's people that are, you know, that it should be a safe space, right? Like, but when you're really young, like, I have an issue with anxiety sometimes. Like that. So I get on stage and I sing Bad Moon Rising by CCR. And when I get off stage, like, I was so nervous, and you know how I don't know if you know, but when you first start playing, sometimes you feel like, oh, I screwed everything up, right? Oh, it was no good. So I started to get what I now know as an anxiety attack immediately after I got off stage, because I could feel it coming through my body, like the warmth and whatever. So I went directly to the bathroom, and I went in there by myself, and I cried. Like I was like I was vibrating. But if something's worthwhile, we have to be able to step out of that ourselves, like you said when we were talking earlier, and step out of our comfort zone and keep pushing. And that's what I did. And like I said, for a while, I aided that with alcohol, right? Like that's if it got too much nerves or whatever, I'd start drinking. And then it started into like a thing where it was more about the party for a while than it was about the music.
Right.
And then eventually, when I started recording my own music in 2014, it's only recent too. Like I only quit drinking 5 years ago, so it's not like I've been sober for a real long time. But in the last 5 years, I've been able to. I don't have stage fright when I get on stage anymore. I don't worry about drinking. I don't worry about any of that, because I know I'm comfortable with who I am and what I'm doing now, right? Like, and I know that it's a part of who I am. Cool. Music chose me. I didn't choose music. And that's how I see it for all of us too. Like, that's why we can't walk away. Like I've tried to quit before, and here I am, 49, still playing. Like it's still the driving force in what I do every day is music. Like I'm a radio DJ like everything I do kind of centers around music in some way, except for this podcast. but you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, music was a gift that I got from my grandparents. And I think as Indigenous people, we were given that gift for generations, like with the drum and with singing, and we just don't recognize it that way. And I think as people move back towards where we came from and back towards their own culture and stuff, maybe more people will realize that and embrace it more, and embrace the power of music, and how it does heal all of us, right?
Cool.
Totally. For me, it's spending that time on stage, but I think like when I first started, I was really lucky that I had my nephew's partner. They were a Chilean family, and they invited us over for this big barbecue and pig roast and everything. And so they said, we have the Chilean foundation booked for an event, and we have Oscar Lopez as our main main guy. And they said, and so we're just jamming, and I really didn't sing at the time. I was just fooling around, and they liked this one song that the first song I ever wrote, called Powwow Dancer, and it was like about a beautiful dancer, right? I wanted to write a song about this beautiful woman dancer. So I wrote this song, and they liked it, and they one of the cousins said, "Hey, would you perform this song at our event?" And I was like, I've never performed like that before. I've played guitar, fooling around with Trent, and his dad, lucky enough, was to have me jam a few times too. But I hadn't taken anything serious or gotten on stage before. So I got to the event, and it was sold out. And the first person that was like, I could almost reach out and touch them as far as I could see back, and I'm like, what the hell did I just sign up for? And I was pretty freaked out. But one of the uncles that asked me to come play, he got up and he actually got the crowd clapping to the song. And so like I was sold after that.
You had a hype man on your first gig and everything. Look at this guy.
After that, I was just like, this is kind of what I want to do, and cool. But like I was telling Trent and the other people we were performing with at the theater in Brooks, I said, it's the opposite of riding a bike, within like 48 hours of me not being on a stage, I feel like my presence start to weaken. I feel like my voice, and that there's a special magic that you can live within yourself on that stage and be able to do certain things. Well, for me anyway, and I start to lose that within like 48 hours of not performing in front of a live audience. You can't get this magical feeling, that exchange of energy, performing by yourself or practicing. It's, well, me anyway. So that's
Right.
yeah, it's like a yeah. So
What
that's
about
how I
you,
got it.
Walter?
Yeah.
Oh God, I was terribly nervous. Like just around that Vision Quest, my very first music festival was the Three Fires with Quemicon, out east, and man, we were tuning our guitars on the side of the stage without a tuner, and just we were out of tune, and the sound man stopped us. You guys suck. You're out of tune. You know what this is? It's those old school quartz ones. Eh?
Do you know what this is? Very passive aggressive, right?
It was about the size of a smartphone, and they put it on there, and we tuned up, and he goes, so go say hi to the crowd. And I must have sounded like Porky Pig out there. And then I'm like, thank you. Just nervous when I started playing.
Yeah.
My leg was shaking, and and just I felt like we just butchered it. And there must have been about 1,000 people out there, and our set was only a half hour. And then I was sitting. We finally got off stage. It seemed like forever, and I was sitting there smoking by the side of the stage. Man, we suck. Man, we're never doing that again. And I'm gonna be a librarian or something. And then they put us up in teepees. They were camping outside, and so we went around that stage, and there's about 50 people waiting for us. And we were signing autographs and taking pictures with people, and
Nice.
so like years later, talking to professional performers, you don't know what people are taking in.
Yeah.
You have no idea. You might think you're like, being a stumble bum, but that you move people with music.
Yeah.
And so that was my first thing. No matter what happens, don't tell the audience like something's gone wrong. Just keep playing, keep talking, and just. And so that's
what my thing was.
Yeah.
My dad used to always tell me, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Nobody has to know it.
Yeah.
Don't swear.
Yeah.
Don't make a face.
Yeah.
Just keep playing and keep smiling, like-
Yeah. Fake it till you make it.
Yeah. And then just the gigs, I've been doing it ever since.
That's awesome.
When did the cultural aspect, get involved with your music, or when did you start mixing it in the flute and the hand drum? And
I think it was with Michael Auger, that comes from Rose Auger, and Dale Auger is his brother. And then he was running a theater group called the Mountain Song back in the late 90s. And we would go around to schools, and that was with Travis McGinnis and Amanda Woodward back then, and like these people, Bruce Mistaken Chief, Trevor Prairie Chicken. I don't know, he goes by something different now.
yeah, Kit. Yeah,
Yeah.
Kit.
Yeah, so he was part of that, and then we'd go around to communities and different high schools, and then that's when I first picked up the flute. Like Michael taught me the basics, and then I just kind of took it from there. So that's when the cultural stuff started happening, and it just kind of took a life of its own.
That's amazing. And my experience is very similar. Being from somewhere else and growing up in Treaty 7, I had no idea about any of the ceremonies. I had no idea about the teachings of my homeland. But the Blackfoot people here actually opened their arms and brought me to some sweats, and even gave me a spirit name, Onski, which means singer. Did you feel the same experience with when it comes to teachings?
There's a lot of political stuff here in Treaty 7, and that kind of gets in our own way. I think professionally it's been beneficial, but also I get denied a lot of gigs because I'm not from around here, which I think is pretty self-defeating in terms of what we're trying to do as a whole nation of Turtle Island, if you look at the big picture. But having said that, I did actually go to a couple fasts with Leopard and Peter Strikes with a Gun, like down south, and Arnold Mountain Horse as well invited me into his sweat. And so that was really when I found out how long Blackfoot ceremonial songs are, man. they are like American Pie and Hey Jude all in one. You're just cooking and you think the door is going to open, and they take another big breath. Come on, guys.
I haven't experienced that, but I'm picturing it in my head. So
You gotta experience it once, for sure.
Their songs are pretty long.
Yeah. I went to a Bear Sweat, it was called, and it was put on by James Medicine Crane and those people. So I was lucky enough to experience and get welcomed in there. But we also went to the World Indigenous Youth Conference.
Nice.
And that was actually in Peru. And so this James brought his pipe, and they got to mix with some of the Peruvian people there and kind of mix ceremonies, right? So so cool.
You're lucky they let you on the plane to come home. You look like one of them.
That's true. They got drafted. Well, actually, no. They are
pulled aside for screening,
but they. I would have to be a little bit smaller. Yes, you're right.
They're
Actually,
a little bit shorter,
they're
right?
tiny.
You know what's funny? We bought a 2-year-old. It was for 2-year-olds, right, in their country, and there was like a brand new baby that we bought them for here, and so we tried, and it would not fit the brand new Blackfoot baby though, right? Like brand new Blackfoot baby, this 2-year-old thing from or jumper from Peru just wouldn't fit. Yeah. So they are quite small.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So tell us about. What's some of the more memorable places that you've performed?
Oh man, there's just so many. I think the Connections program that's run by the Seeds Foundation, that is a multicultural. It's a multicultural thing. So they have African Americans, they have Islam 101. You learn about the Muslim people with disabilities, and then I do the Indigenous. And that was passed on from Dale Auger, so I've been part of that program for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So one of the most memorable things to me was, it depends where you're from, and, dipping into a little bit of, I guess, hot water here, but because there's this belief out there that Blackfoot women don't sweat, and I don't know where that comes from, but I was out doing the Indigenous thing, and we do a sweat lodge, which is a teaching sweat, and the Blackfoot school had come from Siksika Nation, and the young girls there just said, "Mom, there's this native guy here, and there's a sweat." They talked to the clan mother, and there was non-Indigenous students there as well. Yeah. And so they got on the phone and said, "Can we sweat?" And she goes, "Well, if it's important to you, my girl, and you want to be ambassador, go ahead." And so they did. And so I had 3 Blackfoot young girls in there singing their songs while I was conducting that ceremony. And that always just stuck in my head, that they would, step out of their comfort zone and share. And it was important to them because there was students from all over Alberta that attend that program. Yeah. And they're just, just going to schools and, being part of the National Arts Center roster, and some of the up north, that you get a lot of, northern communities that never have presenters, so it's kind of a big deal when you go.
That's amazing. Yeah, like there's so many programs when it comes to music. Growing up, we were talking about alcohol. We were talking about certain addictions and stuff. And one of the things we were noticing is that there wasn't very many men's programs or stuff for men. What was your experience, looking for any of those programs, or if you
know what, I to be honest with you, that's still a big issue. A lot of the programs are set up for single moms, the housing situations, anything that's going on, because I work with part of my role in the community is supporting the bros that are in Calgary Corrections, and
Yeah.
and they have a tough time when they come out in terms of finding a place to live. And right now we're going through a housing crisis, and let's be honest, racism's alive and well. Like you come and show up at a place, they take one look at you. Oh, it's been rented. Well, we made this arrangement. I came here, and so I was lucky enough that I usually find housing through acquaintances that know who I am.
You have to. Like, you know what the biggest step that they did to institutionalize the racism of rentals is the mandatory credit checks that they're doing with people now, because that's how they automatically disqualify people. I was a housing outreach worker in Edmonton for 6 years.
I know, man. I still owe Columbia House for all those CDs from the 80s.
That's how they make sure that they can feel like they're not being racist, but they can deny us in the same way. And that's I came up like I housed hundreds of people in Edmonton, and I don't do it anymore, so I'm gonna be real. I lied to almost every landlord. Like that's how I got people into housing, because that job to me turned into a sales job, because I was not only selling the person that was experiencing homelessness, because you got to be like, they're doing this, they're doing that, but I was also selling a program. Well, we're going to help them with this. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, and it doesn't always happen that way, right? Like the program, sometimes things fall through and things happen, and then the landlords get mad right away. Well, you said this is gonna. Well, you can't control everything around you, and you can be mad at me, but I'm trying to help somebody get off the street, and that's the bottom line to me. I'm not going to say sorry for not being 100% honest with you, because the system you have set up in front of me is rigged against these people already. So sorry, but I'm not sorry, and the thing that we deal with our Indigenous people on the street is like, it's hard. Like it's hard. It's hard for me to just even be around it anymore after I did it for 6 years, because I had so much, like, I took on so many people's trauma. Like you're helping people at the absolute lowest point of their lives, and you're seeing them where they're at their, they're really at probably the hardest crossroads of their lives. They have to make choices where, and part of those programs is we're not requiring them to be sober, but they still have to make choices to get into safer spaces and to move towards that sobriety, right? And you can't control people. And you got to be able to say, look, I'm just trying to help them and help the community at the same time, because harm reduction helps everybody. If you can get somebody off the street, even if they're using drugs, they're safer in their own space than they are in somebody's alley. Like it's safer for the community in general. Yeah. And I know these are controversial ideas for people to take on, but it's still like, not everybody is going to find their way to sobriety and to the path when you want them to. Like, they have to do it on their own, and some people never will. Some people, the trauma is so deep in them that they're never going to be able to get past that. And that's one of the hardest things about being a helper in the community, is knowing that you can only help people as much as they're going to help themselves.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I know it's like, it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch our brothers and sisters struggle. It's hard to see people that you've invested in make the wrong choices and eventually maybe pass away. Like, how many people, you work in the community, how many people have you seen? How many funerals have you been to? Like, it's hard in our community, but we do our best to help where we can, because if you start taking on everybody else, then you can't help anymore, because now you're the one who needs the help, right?
Yeah, and I think, like, even like spiritually, when we talk about some of those rules that have been put in place when it comes to being sobriety and using medicines, you can tell that a lot of those rules were set in place for alcohol. You have to be sober for 4 days to be able to, and it's having that respect for the medicines for sure. But now that we're talking about meth and crack and all these harder drugs where you're never gonna get somebody to make 4 days, You know, it's
not until they're ready to move on, right?
Exactly. Like it's just, and maybe the smell of that sweetgrass could have saved their lives that night. So it's
funny you bring that up. There was you know, I'm not going to name the elder, but he used to subscribed and believed in 4 days clean, and this fella showed up in a rough spot. He wasn't, let's say he was hungover. He just wasn't in like up to that 4 day standard, and then that guy went home and he took his life.
Yeah.
And that elder never forgot that. And then he's thought about it, like, where did that come from? There was no alcohol here before pre-contact, and
exactly,
you know, so you got to help people when they help, and you never know if they're hanging by a thread. So he says he lets them in now as long as they're, you know, being respectful of the ceremony and not acting out. And you know, it doesn't happen all that often, but he doesn't turn people away no more.
I've heard similar stories too.
We had that happen in Regina when I was last there. I, you know, because they were throwing on an event for a young boy who got murdered there. He was 12 years old, and they had it in the park. And I asked my cousin, I said, "Is there going to be security there?" Like, and she said, "No. Once the people that live that are houseless walk by and they see the teepees and the elders there, they'll have respect. We don't need." You know, security there. And I was like, okay, like, you know, so we went along with the event, and there was a couple that was walking by, and the girl said, "I need help."
Yeah.
She came up and said, "Can you help me? I want help." And the elder said, "I'll help you right now." He said, "You're invited into our circle." He said, "Come sit down." And he said, here, he called the husband over, and the husband said, no, I'm too messed up. He said, "I'll watch from a distance. I'll stay back over here." And he walked that he did some sort of circle ceremony with this young girl right on the spot there, though, you know. And it's amazing to see that. And I think, like, you know, even if the person who's addicted is under the influence, maybe we could have an elder that's brushing the smoke onto them, so they're not actually touching the medicines, but they still get that healing and that smell, you know.
Yeah, because that is a good point, what you were saying. Like, there was no alcohol when these ceremonies began, so where did these rules come from? And was that a way to gatekeep people out of them, you know? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I don't know and I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody or anything, but it is a good question to ask. Like, where did that rule come from? Because not everybody follows it either, right? So it's like, is it from a certain tribe? Is it just something that somebody decided, you know? Like,
I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like he said, there was we didn't have anything to be addicted to, so those rules were definitely made. It's kind of like our names, right? A lot of our names were given to us by English people, right? So it's like,
Also, a funny story about names. My dad told me his grandfather told him about our last name, which is Achikte. So it's basically a black duck, like a useless bird, basically, right? And he said, Achikte, it was my dad's Musham Paul. He said, Achikte, that was not your grandfather's name. He said when people were gathered around at the signing of the treaties, they would be asking people, what's your name? And then so every now and then people would chime, you know how Indians are, we joke around. Somebody be like, that guy's name is Achikte or whatever. That's what he said. Like, that was a joke, and the guy wrote it down or whatever. He's like, your actual name, and I don't know the word. My dad said he can't remember the word, but this old man was born in 1885 that was telling my dad this story when he was 20 years old. So he was like, I believe the story, right? He was like, that was somebody teasing your grandfather that was his name. You know, he was a useless bird, basically, right? So, but that name is stuck with us to this day, right?
Well, it's like when you're receiving a name, if you don't speak that language, how can you say yes or no?
Yeah.
You just kind of say, okay, that's the name that I'm going to get in this language I don't understand. So, you know, when I think a lot of our people were being put, you know, on reserves at that time. That's why there was that misconception with English. And because my Musham's like, it's Mustos, which is gray buffalo, on my mom's side, but they called him Long Man because he was tall. So, it is what it is with the English.
Or long back.
Yeah, I got a thanks Musham. I got a long back now, right from the neck to the ankles. Well, I commend you for all the work that you do there, Walter. With music, and our journey is never over. I think we're all three of us sitting here. We're lifers in this art game. Whether it's I consider maybe this isn't music, but it definitely is a form of art. So it's a form of storytelling and keeping those stories and conversations.
It's a tradition among our people. Even when you write a song, you're being a storyteller, right? And I think that's the cool thing about how technology is advanced. It's given our people new ways to be able to capture our own stories and our own words from our own worldview. And I think that's important. Like, I wouldn't want anybody to tell your story without, your perspective on it, right? And I'd feel the same way,
Well, it's kind of funny. I was at a shaken tent just a little while ago. One of the bros up north, Leonard Cardinal, invited me up there, and the grandfathers came in. It was a star being came into the lodge and said, "You guys got to stop comparing to one another, because nobody is you. Nobody can tell your story if you sing a song or if you deliver a line. There's no human being on the planet that could do it like you can."
Exactly.
They said we're like the trees, like you'll never find two identical trees, like even in its own species, right? So that's an interesting point.
Oh, for sure. Well, thank you for coming in here and being a part of season 2 here at the Deadly Uncle podcast. You're definitely a deadly
uncle.
Okay.
And thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
It was great to meet you and learn a little bit more about you. And that's what I love about this, is just being able to connect with other people and learn about, everybody can do so much, and it's great to see other people do different things, right? Like,
well, I appreciate being here. So when are you guys having my second cousin podcast?
we had some females comment on our podcast and say, "Hey, what about the aunties?" And we always tell them that's the deadliest podcast.
And I don't want to even try to tell a female story for them. I don't need to mansplain nothing.
No mansplaining here. We love our females, our mothers, our sisters, our grandmothers, our aunties. Without you, none of us would be who we are. So we always say we love you, but we can't put on a podcast for you because you would be considered the deadliest, not the deadly. So, there we go.